We've had a lot of learning in Smartline. We've spent the last 3 years learning, and I think we're all very tired of learning. Now we want to do something. So what are the things that we have learned? First of all, the key learning for me is that I'm working with a community, and when I speak about a community, I'm not just speaking about our participants, those 300 very altruistic households. I'm speaking about the community, I'm speaking about the businesses, I'm speaking about the council, I'm speaking about Volunteer Cornwall. We're all in this together, and without that team effort, we really wouldn't have had, we might have had the data, which of course, being a data scientist is front and centre for me, but we would not have had the insights that we have presented here today. So, what are those insights? From the perspective of our 300 participants, they are amazing in that they let us into their homes and their lives in a very, very intimate way, very trusting, obviously, as well. Unfortunately, they're quite unwell, both physically and mentally. They have very, very low levels of well-being. They report very, very high levels of social isolation. And I guess what we should have figured out when we first started Smartline, they are not the most technology adept or accepting of people, because it's very important to know that there's a difference. You know, you might be well able to use your iPad or your tablet, but whether you want to use it or not is a very separate question as to what you want to use it for. So, and these are the kind of questions that keep us in employment, thankfully. So with those insights, in terms of the businesses, we have an incredibly vibrant business sector in Cornwall. You go to them and they will provide what you require, and that has happened time and time again as part of the Smartline project, and that and they come to us, and we had an amazing example of the 3 companies, totally different, from very high tech to lower tech, but the common denominator being health and well-being focused, trying to do something for their communities. And that's something that's very, very important about the Cornish community, is that they have they're very embedded. What they do is for Cornwall, and you know, if it has to cross the Tamer, so be it, but you know, they're in it for Cornwall, and that's very, very special. So what are we going to do with these insights? What we're really hoping to do is, I actually want to just step back to just a little bit. When we first start, as a medical school, we're very, very conscious of how much we engage with the community. You know, there's a response burden. We don't want to bug people too much. We want to keep things as short, as snappy as possible. Halfway through the Smartline project, we went out to our participants and we said to them, what are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? What can you do more? What can we do more with you? And they were like, you can engage us more. So I hope they remember that for the next 3 years, because we are going to engage them more. We need to put that in the next newsletter, basically. Yeah, warning. So what are we going to do? We are going to hopefully have a more engaged, intervention-based series of research activities through engagement with the households themselves, the communities that they're embedded in. People live in households that live in communities. You do not target one without the other. It's not this top-down, bottom-up approach. It's all in together. It's a bloody mess. It's brilliant. Our partners, who have been really outstanding, particularly in bearing with us when we were getting our feet together. Sarah, I really appreciated your honesty, because at various parts in Smartline, we weren't exactly sure what you're doing. You know, this event is brilliant, but you know, we stuck through it, and with the businesses, because without the businesses, we wouldn't be here. Remember, this is ERDF-funded money. And core to this, and is Liz still here? And the policymakers out there, our councillors, core to this will be solid evaluation. Because unfortunately, we're not it's not that we're not allowed, but we're not really going to receive any more funding to help these people if we don't show that we have made a positive impact. And most of the time, people will raise their eyes to heaven and say that we're going to be speaking about an economic impact. But just like Liz said, actually that's not what Smartline is about. We want to make sure our evaluation demonstrates, of course, economic impacts, but also health and well-being, and how we develop that more integrated health and well-being evaluation framework. So, the research areas. In Smartline we spoke a lot about themes, and that was just the way it organically started. You worked with this theme, you worked in that theme. And what we found halfway through is that nobody really knew what theme they were working in anymore, because we were all working together in this sort of mishmash. So what I'm going to try and refer to today, and for the rest of Smartline, is research areas. And nobody heads one or the other of these up, although to be, just so everybody's clear, I'm boss. But, well, actually it's really in my, but I want everybody to work together. These aren't necessarily areas that are in themselves, they're all working together. And what those are understanding tech readiness, and we kind of know now we should have done a bit more of that in the first instance. Understanding how technology can overcome social isolation, exclusion or isolation. It goes back to Emma's question to Sarah. Is there a role for technology? Can technology become too much? We want to maximise our sensor data. We have a lot of data. It's incomprehensible, so I didn't even bother trying to remember how much we have. But we have a lot of data, and the emphasis is now on us to put this to good use. And we also, because we have that strong business comparison, and without businesses in Cornwall, you know, they're part and parcel of the fabric. We really need to understand the knowledge flows between these businesses. How do they maximise their knowledge flows? What sort of networks do they use? Do they develop and to their benefit? And I say again, thinking about evaluation and what evaluation tools are already out there. Do we develop our own to go to the policymakers in year 2? So in 5 years' time, or well, 2 years' time, 5 years from the start, to say, listen, these are our findings. They'll say, oh, this is very interesting. And we'll say, oh, but wait until you see the figures. Because unfortunately, or fortunately, that's what policymakers will respond to. So when we go out at the end of the next 3 years, we want to go with the evidence base and also with the facts and figures, so that the amazing findings we have from Smartline will really resonate with people that can do more with them. So, in understanding tech readiness, we need to identify what tech people are ready to use, what is acceptable to them, and what is feasible to them. And I don't mean just our cohort, our baseline, our 300 participants. I also mean the voluntary sector, what the voluntary sector needs to go out and meet the needs, the current overlooked needs that are out there. What does Coastline need to do with their user platform to ensure that it's getting every single person out there in their register their needs met. So it's tech readiness across, and as of course for the businesses. So it's tech readiness across the board, and to understand how technology can be used to better people's health and well-being. So it's not about using tech for the sake of it. It's about understanding why. It's understanding what works, but also the mechanisms as to what works, so we can go out there and explain it to others. The one, I guess, that's quite close to my heart is understanding how technology can overcome social exclusion or isolation. So I come from rural Ireland. I come from a farm, and This idea that urban people have, those people way up north, that living in green urban green fields is going to be absolutely brilliant for your health and well-being, really sort of sets my teeth on edge, because obviously they haven't spent like 3 weeks in in a house surrounded by just grey clouds and rain, as you often do in rural Ireland. I'm from the west coast of Ireland. So the social isolation and the potential for social isolation among rural residents is something that really resonates with me. And it's not something, and our findings from the Smartline, Smartline 1, let's say that, was that it's not something that's unique to, say, women, or it's not something that's unique to the older people in our cohort. It's something that we found across the board. And it's something that we really need to respond to. So how do we do that? How can technology, given that technology is our mandate as part of our funding, understanding what works? So what I'm really keen to do, one of the interventions that I'm really keen to run, is to develop a social networking app for the participants and align that with a physical activity intervention in terms of the medical school, to try and motivate people to get out there outside a little bit more. Because one of the key learnings that we have from Cheryl's research is that, and Tim touched about this, our cohort, our people are not going out, because there are people. Our people are not going outside. Some of them are spending 24/7 indoors. So, there's no good having a social, physical activity intervention if with a group that aren't going outside. We need to motivate them. And I think the key to this will be getting them networked together, having the motivation from your neighbours, etc. So this is one of the interventions that we're thinking about scoping out. So, and my feeling is that whilst we all know physical activity is good for us, that actually it will be the networking, the communicating amongst each other that will have the greatest impact, and the walking will just be the side event. So, maximising the sensor data. There is so much we can do with the sensor data. We know that the indoor environment is bad for us. We also know that the outdoor environment is bad for us, and the sensors have shown that. So how can we, so for example, in the most recent paper we've published from Smartline, we found that people that live in, have a mouldy smell in their house are more likely to have asthma. What can we do? Do we get in the technology? Do we get in the dehumidifiers? Yeah, we can do that. That will be one response based on the survey, based on the sensor data, and we can track that. Or do we do a more behavioural change intervention where we go out and we give people information, or again we have that social networking app where we give them prompts to open their window every so often, because let's be honest, we're all absolutely so busy with the best intentions, you can't remember everything. So these are the kind of things that we're going to trial and engage our community with. So as I said, they may actually really regret 18 months ago saying that we needed to engage them more. So we're bringing we're using this very, very high density data. There's so much coming out of it. The really snazzy little sensors to hopefully really change people's behaviours and their outcomes in terms of health and well-being. In terms of the businesses, as I've said before, Cornwall has an incredibly vibrant business sector. In Cornwall, you can't you can't be slack. You cannot be a slack business. People aren't going to come to you. You have to be dynamic. You have to be out there. You have to be born global. You know, your business strategy cannot be, oh, well, you know, people might come along and we'll get involved in this. Or, you know, my neighbour lives in Kensington, so he's going to give me $500,000. Unfortunately, that's not quite how it works in Cornwall. What works in Cornwall is the networks of businesses working together, how their information flows, how they share information. Is it digital? Is it online? And we need to understand that so we can optimize it. And it's not just the high-end technology businesses, it's all the businesses. Because without the businesses in Cornwall, I'm pretty sure that our cohort in Camborne, Redruth, Iluggan and Poole will be a lot worse off. And evaluation is going to be the backbone of what we're going to do, because I'm a data nerd. I've always worked with, I don't mean to sound bitter, but I've worked with data since before it was called big data. So, Sarah, you might know how I feel. Yeah, everybody's on the bandwagon. And I've always used large-scale statistical models, and I really enjoy it. When I sit down to code something, I can feel my heart rate going down. You know, the pressure is off. There's just, it's bliss. I know it's not for everybody, and a lot of you are looking at me with such pity in your eyes, but anyway. It's unfortunate that we can no longer do science for the reason science. We have to do science for policy, and that's one of the reasons I joined the European Centre for Environment and Human Health, because I really do think science should matter and should demonstrate impact and go and get itself on the mandate of policymakers. So we want to make sure through everything we do is fully evaluated. So it may not be, even if it's a small scale, 5 people are having a coffee morning, what is the impact of that? And this, I really do believe, will be of interest to our partners, the council, because and for Volunteer Cornwall, because you're able to go out and say, well, actually, this is what has shown to work in Cornwall. I keep using the word Cornwall a lot, because that's where we're based. We've heard a lot of SMART being spoken about during during the 2 days. One of the main things that's really special for me, and everybody has said what's special to them about Smartline, is that it's one of the few projects that's smart and rural. Most SMART initiatives are in big cities. You've SMART Manchester, you've SMART London, you have SMART large North American cities. And that's great, but we've already heard and we already know that these cities already have a lot. This is one of the first initiatives that we have that is actually looking at a predominant, they're based in towns, but they are predominantly what we would call rural, or at least in peripheral regions. And this is really, really special. This is one of the few projects where we're getting insight to this sort of community. And there's going to be a lot of learning. So it's not just the learning that we get from Smartline that will be felt in Cornwall. It's going to be felt in all those other areas and regions around the UK and Ireland and Europe potentially that usually don't have this sort of investment and infrastructure. And that's what's really, really special. So who needs to live in Manchester when you live in Camborne, Iluggan, Redruth and Poole?